Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Clever, and I am the Partner Relationship Manager at ByteSpeed. Thank you for joining our webinar this afternoon with co-hosted by Arctic Wolf. We'll really um, give you a quick overview of ByteSpeed, and then we'll have Mike here from Arctic Wolf, as well as Parker, introduce themselves and give us the order of the day for our discussion. So as I mentioned, I'm the Partner Relationship Manager at ByteSpeed. We recently partnered with Wolf and have a variety of great, whether you're looking for just a small, dip your toe in the pond, so something a little more exhaustive. They've got a variety of options for you. Like giving them ideas for different ways to. So, as you already may be familiar with ByteSpeed, we've been in business since 1999, really mostly working with K-12 schools, offering a variety of solutions from desktops, custom-built servers, esports equipment, and over the years grew to have an infrastructure shop with a variety of engineering teams that can help you with network deployments, you name it. But really today we want to discuss cybersecurity, and so I'll hand it over to Mike and Parker, have them introduce themselves. Feel free to comment, ask any questions. We would like to keep it an open-ended discussion. So at any point in time, we'll be watching the chat. If you have a question about something, we'll be more than glad to address it. But thanks again for your time today. Parker, Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Clever. Parker, if you want to start.
Yes. Thanks everybody for joining. Parker Havel. I am the partner development rep with Arctic Wolf. I've been working with Clever and the ByteSpeed team to curate content for this, get everything lined up, and just assisting them if they have any needs from Arctic Wolf, to making sure that they're positioning the right services within with their customers, and just any way I can add support. I'm their first contact.
Awesome. Thanks, Parker. And my name is Mike Vogley. I am the Arctic Wolf Director of Sales Engineering. So as a little intro of myself personally, I'm located out of Minnesota, born and raised here. That's where we've got our headquarters for Arctic Wolf in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. And father of three. I've got three munchkins. One of them's 13. I've got a 10-year-old and a 9-year-old. And as far as my career goes, I've come from originally the infrastructure space, both physical and virtual, doing implementation and then technical sales in that space, and then moved over to software as a service where I did ITSM for a while. And more recently, I've been in the security operations space here with Arctic Wolf. So I am thrilled to be here. Thank you to Clever and Parker for setting this up. We'll jump in and talk about the agenda here. We just did quick introductions, but I'm going to start off with some cybersecurity insights, just some thoughts about the market, thoughts about threats, and give you a sense of what we're seeing as a cybersecurity leader. And then we'll jump into an anatomy of an attack. And the reason I think this is important is because a lot of times we talk at a high level about what takes place during a threat actor trying to attack an environment. So I wanted to get a little more specific about what that looks like and potentially where we could help as Arctic Wolf. Then we'll talk about cyber risk more generally and how we can approach reducing that for your organization. And I'll leave you with two items, both the cyber resilience assessment and the incident response jumpstart retainer. I think those are two easy ways to get started. So I will talk about how you can do that, and then we'll get back to ByteSpeed at the end. One thing I do want to call out is please do interact via Q&A through the chat. Clever will let me know if there's any questions throughout, and happy to get those addressed for you. So let's jump in. We'll start with some cybersecurity insights. So when I talk about these stats and charts that I'll pull up, these are coming from a few different areas of our business. Number one, through our threat intelligence, and that is the Arctic Wolf Labs team that we have. And their entire goal in life is to mine and harvest the insights from our platform and present those back to the market so that both our customers and organizations in general can learn from what we've learned. And we've also got the Security Operations Center. So these are our triage folks that are dealing 24/7 with threats and trying to stop them on a daily basis. And then we also have our in-house incident response team. And those are folks that can operate for either an Arctic Wolf existing customer or more often customer organizations that are not a customer yet, but have experienced a breach and need somebody to come in and help eradicate that. So these stats come from all three of those teams. And the first one I want to call out is the pie chart here. Over 29% of the incidents that our IR team is fielding over the past year have been related to business email compromise. So these are things that are easy attacks to execute. They might be on a case-by-case basis. They might be a lower cost to an organization, but they are very prevalent. More than that, though, we've got almost half of the incidents are related to ransomware. So that's where I wanted to stress that this is a real threat. And if you look at the chart on the right, the median across industries for a ransomware demand is about $600,000. And that changes based on industry, but regardless, we've seen that grow over 20% from last year. So this is something that's increasing at a huge rate, and this presents a really real risk to organizations of all shapes and sizes. And to give you a sense of who is being targeted by that, we've got this industry breakdown. So this is what our teams are seeing as far as industries affected by these types of threats. And you can see that manufacturing, unfortunately, is leading here with 26% of the volume of incidents. But no organization, no industry is immune from this. And it's something that we all need to prepare for. So whether you see yourself in manufacturing, healthcare, education, or even down there at the bottom on legal or nonprofit, this is something you should be thinking about and something that presents a real risk to your organization. Now, historically, we at Arctic Wolf use this slide to talk about how broad visibility is necessary in order to combat threats. So not having a single tool in place in one space, like an identity tool or infrastructure as a service tool that's monitoring that. Rather, having all of these to cover the entire attack surface. And what you're seeing from these percentages is the number of investigations that we do that are based on indicators that originally come from that source. So a firewall, 5% of the time, is the source that launches an investigation for us. And only 15% of the time does that come from the endpoint. So altogether, it shows that we're gathering information and launching investigations based on a broad set of visibility. But more recently, this has changed a little bit. This is dynamic as you'd imagine. And what we're seeing over the last 12 months is that the identity space is really what's driving most of our investigations. And so you'll see in this chart, the blue portion is identity related indicators. So a restricted country login is the top one by far. So 7 out of the 10 most common indicators for us are related to the identity space. And I don't say that to say that identity is the most important. I just want to drive home the idea that all of those portions of the attack surface matter. And if you're only addressing one of those spaces with your current technologies, then you're leaving yourself open. You've got gaps and exposures to address. Now, on the proactive side, this is where our threat intelligence team gathered some data to show, hey, where are the root causes of our incidents outside of business email compromise? So where are these coming from? And you'll notice that a quarter of them come from user actions. So this is something that can be addressed pretty easily by making your employees aware of the threats that are constantly coming at them. So making them less susceptible to social engineering or phishing attacks, for example, can take away almost a quarter of this pie. On the other hand, you've got 70% that's related to external exposures. So we might have misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, or just access from the external side of your network. Now, We see a lot of news around, hey, zero-day exploits and things like that. I want to call out one thing, and that is that the known vulnerabilities that we're seeing leveraged by threat actors, 60% of those are over 2 years old. So I'm going to let that sink in for a second. 2-year-old vulnerabilities are driving the majority of the known vulnerability attacks. The reason that's important is that demonstrates that organizations are having a hard time keeping up with and prioritizing which patches are most important and addressing the most critical risks first. So the combination of something like a security awareness training that Arctic Wolf offers, as well as vulnerability management solutions that prioritize those vulnerabilities for you, that's something that can address right out of the gate 75%, I'm sorry, 95% of what threats are out there. Now, if there are questions, by the way, please throw them in the chat. Clever will let me know and we can make this interactive. But I'm going to take you through what I call the anatomy of an attack. And I think this just gives a good idea of what paths a threat actor typically would take, and then where in that kill chain we can address it as Arctic Wolf. So we've got our threat actor. Of course, he's wearing a hoodie and he's hunched over his laptop. The first thing that he's going to do is what we call external reconnaissance. And this is just really poking at the outside of your organization, anything that's exposed from external ports and devices that are accessing the internet. That's something that they're going to be pushing against to see where you might have vulnerabilities. Now, once a target is identified in an organization and they're able to use one of those vulnerabilities to get in, that's where the internal reconnaissance starts. And this is where the threat actor is looking for what matters in the environment. How do they move from place to place? Which systems are vulnerable? How do they plan to get around? Then they move into target acquisition. And this is where they're really gathering credentials and trying to find the crown jewels of your organization. And once they find those crown jewels, how do they get there? How do they position themselves within your network by moving laterally, escalating their own privileges, and getting access to the right systems so that they can get access to the data? At that point, that's where it gets scary and they start exfiltrating data. They're taking data out of your environment. This is the first step in what will become extortion of your organization, because now they've got a copy external to your environment that they can potentially leak on the dark web or sell to other threat actors. Then we move into the ransomware phase. This is where they say, not only do I have a copy of your data externally, but now all of your internal data, at least the sensitive portion of it, they've encrypted, including your backups. So now it is unusable to your organization. And at that point, that's where we've got the extortion. This is where they're going to say, hey, I've got your data. I'm threatening to leak it. By the way, your business is down because your data is encrypted and you can no longer use it. And this one, I love. This is a screenshot of how that happens. It's so on one hand silly, and on the other hand a little scary that they present themselves to organizations as support. Hey, why don't you chat with support? You're a friendly threat actor here who's asking you for money in return for the data they've stolen and the encryption keys to get access back to your data. So this is really how it plays out. They will leave instructions for you to join a chat with them, and then you can see the broken English here to demonstrate that they've got your data, how much of it they've got, and then what they're demanding in a ransomware payment, in this case, $80 million. So this is how it goes. And at that point, the organization is going to reach out to an incident response firm. Could be Arctic Wolf, could be a different firm, but you'd also then be reaching out to your cyber insurance team to talk about the costs associated with this breach and how you cover that. So This is everybody's worst day. This is their worst nightmare. This is not what we want to happen. So how does Arctic Wolf address that? Well, first of all, we could get involved at the data exfiltration phase and understand when data is leaving your environment. We have network sensor capability where we can understand north-south traffic and see that data is leaving, even if it were something like a low and slow attack where they're staying under a certain bandwidth and doing it over a long period of time. We can detect that sort of movement and stop them in their tracks. Now, obviously, we'd love to identify this attack way earlier in the kill chain. So let's talk about that. If they're looking to move laterally or escalate their own privileges, this is something we can detect via our agent on endpoints or via our integrations with identity providers. So it might be Entra ID or Okta or Duo, and we'd be sensing and detecting against, hey, this user is escalating their own privileges or doing something that's anomalous. We would see that, throw a flag, get in and potentially contain that device, disable that user, take action on your behalf to shut them down. Again, earlier is better. So how would we stop them if they're in the target acquisition phase? Well, the tools they're using, Bloodhound, SharpHound, WinRM, those sorts of things, they have clear fingerprints for that type of tool. That's something that we can sense the files that are being downloaded into the environment and used, so then we can shut them down before they're used to access the crown jewels. Earlier still in the kill chain, that internal reconnaissance phase, a lot of times they're using something like PowerSploit or even a legitimate tool like PowerShell. And so if they're doing that, we call that living off the land binary, where they're using a legitimate tool for a malicious use case. And we have detections related to that around our agent so that we could understand that, yes, this is a tool that should be used in the environment, but it's being used in a way that is a threat to the organization. But ideally, we're detecting it even before that, and that is in the external reconnaissance phase. And the way to do this is to shut down those vulnerabilities before they're ever low-hanging fruit for the threat actor. So this is where we're going to address the OWASP top 10, which is essentially the top 10 vulnerabilities that are external facing from your environment that you can solve for ahead of time, so that a threat actor who is probably not looking to work real hard to get into your environment moves on to the next organization because it's just too much work to get in. Now, if all of that were to fail and all of our detections up to that point did not address the issue, did not stop the attacker, that's where the incident response team would jump in and do things like digital forensics. They do root point of compromise analysis, containment, eradication of a threat. They'll even do threat actor negotiation on your behalf. So that as a whole is what I call the anatomy of an attack. And I hope that gives you good context for the rest of our conversation about what a typical threat might look like and where in the kill chain an organization might involve Arctic Wolf. Now, let's shift a little bit to cyber risk as a whole. I think it's important to understand how Arctic Wolf views cyber risk. And we view that as two components working together. Number one, the likelihood that an incident will take place. And number two, if an incident does take place, what's the impact of that incident? So those things together represent your cyber risk as an organization. And there are a ton of different ways that security providers have approached this problem, trying to reduce that risk or eliminate that risk for your organization. So we have kind of detailed this out by categorizing the approaches into 5 different types. And I'll go through these type 1 to type 5, but feel free to throw in the chat if you think your organization is at a particular level in here and kind of meets that level of maturity. I'd be curious to hear where you think you are today. The first type is type one, that is the tools and technology type. And really what this is saying, hey, I'm going to institute technology like an EDR or a firewall. I'm going to put that in my environment, have it send me telemetry, and then I can review that and understand when something's wrong in the environment. Now, that's a great place to start. So I think that it's foundational to any security journey is to have these tools in place. The problem with type one is that it gets really noisy. And unless you have a staff that can decipher that data and understand what really matters, what's important, how do I prioritize it, what's a true positive, what's a false positive, this can get out of hand and be overwhelming really quickly. So the natural evolution of that was to move to type two. And type two is where we wrap services around those tools. So now instead of an EDR, you've got a managed EDR. And instead of a firewall, it's a managed firewall. Again, a really good step and makes it much more efficient so that you can make sense of the alerts that you're getting. But what you end up having is then silos of expertise, where I've got a tool expert instead of a security expert. That's where type three comes in. So type three, I would consider this where most of the MDR vendors in the industry live today. And this is looking more broadly. We talked about that broad visibility earlier. That's really important. This is looking broadly at all of the tools and all the telemetry coming from your environment and addressing them from a security expertise standpoint. So what do all these mean together? How do I correlate across different points of telemetry and understand the truth of what's going on in the environment? Now, this is a great place to be, but it's not the end all be all. And the reason for that is if you're familiar with the NIST framework, MDR really covers the reactive portion of it. It's only addressing how do we react to something that has gone wrong. We got to get in front of that. And that's where type four comes in, the security operations space, which aligns to the original version of NIST. And that is, how do I cover that identify and protect portions of NIST? How do I proactively shut down the gaps, patch vulnerabilities, fix misconfigurations, that sort of thing, so that we're looking at reducing the likelihood of an incident, not just reducing the impact of it. And you might say, hey, that sounds great. That sounds like the total story. Well, what we see is some organizations are putting these solutions in place and they're saying, hey, I checked the box. I've got proactive vulnerability management. I've got reactive MDR. Great. But what does that mean as far as your organization's security journey? What outcome are you shooting for? That's where type 5 comes in, and that's where Arctic Wolf has lived for a long time. This is about understanding what is your organization's current security posture? Where do you want to be in the future? And then how do we set milestones and track achievement against those milestones? So we're running it more like a security program. And it was really nice to see NIST with their second version of the framework come out recently and kind of validate what we've been doing for a long time. They introduced a sixth pillar, which was the govern pillar, which kind of goes across all of them. And that's really saying, hey, it's the you are here portion of the map that tells you what your current situation is so that you can better map out where to go to get to the outcomes you've set out. So I'll pause there for a second. I don't know if there are any questions about this or if anybody wants to comment on where their current organization lives. I will tell you that most of the organizations I talk to are typically between type 1 and type 3. I'd be curious if that's the same as the experience of the folks on the call today. And Clever, I'll ask you to let me know if anybody chimes in.
No questions as far as I can see here. I think we're good to keep going.
Okay. All right. And it looks like we had some answers to the polls there. We got a lot of type 3. Yep. Even some type 4 on there. I will tell you, no matter what type you align with today, I'm not here to say that's the wrong approach. Not at all. In fact, I will say if you're on this spectrum somewhere, you're doing the right things. You're putting in place a foundation that will help you succeed. And then aspirationally, as you look to get to that type 5 and track your organization's security posture over time, that's where Arctic Wolf can help. And that's where, let me get rid of the poll here. That's where we can talk about how Arctic Wolf reduces your risk. So this is how we view organizations' risk. We look at it, these three boxes show how we address it kind of linearly. The first box on the left is about addressing risk proactively. So we've been proven to reduce the likelihood of an incident by up to 90%. And you're asking, okay, how do you do that? Well, the first one we will talk about in a minute is the cyber resilience assessment, which is understanding your current posture. The second one is managed security awareness. And that's that employee training, that security awareness training that we talked about earlier. This is creating what I'll call a human firewall. Instead of looking at your employees as the weakest link in your environment, they can be your biggest asset if you enable them to understand the threats that face them on a daily basis. So this is looking at 3 to 5 minute snippets of education that come out on a biweekly basis, doing phishing simulations, immediately following those up with remediation training if they fail them, really helping to create a culture of security within your organization so that they are more responsive and more aware of things like social engineering and phishing attacks. The third one there is managed risk, and that is our vulnerability management and a vulnerability management solution that's proactive. So this, again, addresses the upfront side of the NIST framework. And this is looking for misconfigurations and vulnerabilities in your environment. And that's scanning both externally, internally, and host-based for vulnerabilities that maybe need to be patched or addressed. And we're not just giving you a list of things to do. It's not homework that you have to do. What we're giving you is a prioritized list based on criticality of your assets. So you'll be working with a concierge team that understands the importance of assets within your environment, understands the threat that is presented by a particular vulnerability, and matches those up to say, hey, here are the first ones you should address. And over time, we will get you to a hardened position from a security posture perspective. The last one I'm going to leave to our discussion here coming up in a couple slides, but the incident response jumpstart retainer, that's something that, again, along with the cyber resilience assessment, is a great way to get started with Arctic Wolf if you don't know where to start today. Now, on the reactive security side, we've also been proven to reduce the impact of an incident by up to 90%. And we do that initially through our managed detection and response solution. So this is going back to the anatomy of an attack. This is where in that kill chain are we detecting a threat actor, and how do we shut them down as quickly as possible once an indicator of compromise is noted. Now, if they make it all the way to the end of that attack, that's where the incident response team comes in. This is, hey, there's somebody in the house. We need help. We need the SWAT team. We need them to do those digital forensics, to do that eradication. So hopefully we never get there. But I will say if there's an organization, a security provider that's telling you they can stop 100% of threats, I would really question that claim. Yes, we do our best, as you can see, 90% likelihood reduction, 90% impact reduction, but there's always going to be just a sliver of residual risk. And so the question is, what do we do with that risk from your organization's perspective? What we want to do with it is transfer that risk financially off of your organization onto another organization. And that might be your cyber insurance provider. And although we don't provide cyber insurance ourselves, we can make you more insurable in the market to drive down your premiums increase your coverage, maybe even reduce deductibles. But we also stand behind our solutions with a security operations warranty. So we've recently bumped this up to $1.5 million of coverage that we will provide based on your subscription to our other offerings. So this is really a testament to how much we believe in what we're providing. Now, I haven't seen any questions yet, so I'm going to jump into the cyber resilience assessment, but please do interrupt me if you've got questions as we go. So the cyber resilience assessment, like I mentioned, is that way for you to understand the "you are here" stamp on the map. Where are you today, and where are you planning to be? How are you doing in your achievement of those outcomes over time? So what we're doing is giving this tool to all of our customers. If you are subscribed to any Arctic Wolf solution, you get the CRA for free. And the reason I'm calling it out today is because it's also available to those who are not Arctic Wolf customers. So you can try this out for free. And what you can do is get a score against the common frameworks like NIST and CIS benchmarks so that you can see how you're doing against those. It's got the timeline there to track your progress over time. And really what we're doing is mapping your current security controls against those frameworks. So now you can dig in and you can see these technologies, these solutions I've put in place, these security controls are giving me this score. And if I implemented XYZ improvements to fill some gaps, my score could go to this next level. So it's a really good way to look at, hey, number one, where are my gaps? And number two, what are the most efficient ways I could improve my score? How could I most quickly and efficiently move my score to a higher position so that I've got a better security posture? And then we even offer this insurability rating portion of it, where we've identified what cyber insurers use as a kind of a good, better, best security posture. So the things that they're looking for organizations to have in place in order to give them the best policies. And we provide that to you so that you can turn around and say to your broker or your insurance provider, hey, look at what I've got in place today. This is why I deserve such and such a policy or a better premium. So I think this is a really good place to start. And I'll say from another proactive standpoint, I want to address the incident response jumpstart retainer. So you may be familiar with incident response retainers from other organizations. What we've seen is that those retainers aren't quite as effective as most organizations want them to be. And it's for several reasons. The main one being that most of them require a bucket of hours to be purchased upfront. And then if no incident occurs by the end of the year, that investment's gone. It's a use it or lose it situation. Additionally, there are typically no SLAs as far as a response if an incident does take place. And then they're not sitting with you and understanding your incident response plan. So it's not really a holistic look at incident response. It's simply a bucket of hours that you're buying into, and if you don't use them, they're gone. So that's why Arctic Wolf introduced our incident response jumpstart retainer. And what makes it different is that we are, number one, we're sitting with you to help understand your incident response plan and give you feedback on that. So we're going to help you put in place a good, solid plan, document it, provide run books so that you can be responsive to any particular type of attack. We assign an SLA to it, so you'll get a 1 hour response time should something happen. Again, this can be if you are not an Arctic Wolf customer and all you've got is our retainer, you call in, you've got a 1 hour response time to get folks involved to start addressing a breach. And I think maybe the best part of all, there's no prepaid hours. So this is not a use it or lose it thing. You will get preferred pricing on an hourly basis. So if something does go wrong, having the retainer in place gives you preferred pricing. And then if you're looking for other reasons to go with the Arctic Wolf incident response retainer, we're probably already a a partner of your insurance provider. We're probably already involved on their panel. So we have a insurance alliances team that is working with insurance brokers and providers across the globe. If you need any help understanding how we work with your insurance provider, please reach out. We can definitely get you in touch with them. But a couple of metrics that I think are compelling. Number one, we have a 92% reduction in ransomware demands. So that's huge. We talked about that being on average $600,000. We reduced that by 92%. In addition to that, we help you restore your business faster because we're not just shutting down the threat and walking out the door. We're helping you get your business back online to make sure that you are again profitable and back to regular business operations. We do that 15% faster than anybody else. And the reason we can do that is because we do over 1,000 of these cases per year. So this is something that we are very good at. We have a great process around it, and I think it's a good reason to put your trust in Arctic Wolf. So as kind of a call to action here, if you are not at a place where you understand what you want to do with your security operations, what outcomes you're looking for, but you know you want to get started, please do look at the cyber resilience assessment and the IR Jumpstart. I think those are the two easiest ways to get in. As I mentioned, the CRA is free for a trial. You can see what it looks like, try to map out your organization's current posture, and then you'll understand where you want to go from there. The IR Jumpstart is just a great thing to have in place. Should something go wrong, you know you've got the experts that you can call up and we'll be right there for you. So that was the content I had set out for today. I'm happy to take questions and talk through them. Otherwise, Clever will talk a little bit about ByteSpeed. But Clever, is there anything out there in the chat that we should address?
No, I can wait a couple minutes here and see if anyone has some last minute thoughts. But if you're looking at the cybersecurity pilot, which seems to be on the top of everyone's minds, would be glad to get on a call with you, get you some quick quotes. I know it's coming up here. November 1st is when I believe it's due. So if you need any product information, quotes, or just want to have a conversation, would be glad to have that with you all. I thought it was interesting when you were talking about the insurance aspect of how working with Dr. Wolf is not only, not only all those preventive or reactive measures that you can benefit, but also the insurance piece. So that's something maybe that, folks are probably not always aware about. Maybe if you can give a couple more comments about that and how others have found it helpful in the past.
For sure, yeah. That's one of the main reasons. We've got, I would say, 5 or 6 reasons that prospects typically look to purchase Arctic Wolf solutions, and cyber insurance is right up there as one of the top ones. The reason being, it has gotten exponentially more expensive to get coverage these days. A few years ago, things were different, but insurance companies have recognized that they were paying out an unsustainable amount based on the premiums they were charging. So now what's happened is premiums have gone up, coverage levels have come down for the same price. Deductibles are high. And there are even some organizations we've talked to that talk about carve-outs for particular types of events. Like, oh, it's a ransomware event, so we've got to carve out, and you didn't purchase that piece of it. It's just gotten more difficult to navigate. And so having a partner involved that understands that process and understands uh, what's necessary, what's reasonable, and can also stand behind you and say, hey, this organization is backed by Arctic Wolf, and as such, they've got proactive security in place, they've got reactive security in place, they have an incident response plan. Here's an assessment with exported deliverables that you can provide to your insurance company to prove your current posture. Those are all things that go a long way to driving down premiums, increasing coverage, and just overall making things better for your organization from an insurance perspective.
That's great. And Mike, you can keep me honest here, but the incidents with the IR Jumpstart is really kind of like an insurance uh, policy in some ways. Particularly, like you mentioned, the SLA aspect. You get that 1 hour SLA, you get a discounted retainer rate, probably around 295 for IR services. Um, and really, it's such a great deal. Ballpark pricing, it's about 5 grand. So for about $5,000, you get that aspect of the 1 hour SLA, a reduced hourly rate for further IR services, access to IR planning documents through a central portal, proven incident run books. It's a really great plan to keep on file and just kind of have swift remediation in the event of an active incident. So, anything to add there, Mike, to just a quick summary that I gave of the IR?
No, I think that's great. I think that's as far as bang for your buck goes, it's probably the place to start. Also, like I mentioned before, the CRA to understand where your posture is. And then once you've got those things in place, then it becomes a question of, do you want to start with proactively addressing your security with uh, training for your employees? Do you want to do vulnerability management to get ahead of and kind of stop shoveling water out of the boat and start plugging the hole in the boat? Or is it something that you want to put a class leading MDR in place so that we can interrupt that threat actor early in the kill chain? It those are details about where you want to start, but I think that incident response retainer and the CRA are really the quickest way to value to get started.
Sweet. Well, look at that. We got through the program 15 minutes early here, so um, which is awesome. We have a breach button on our website where if you're experiencing an attack at any point in time, you can go ahead and just click on that breach button on the ByteSpeed website. It'll get you right in touch with a Arctic Wolf team. By the way, even if you weren't using Arctic Wolf at the time, you still can, make use of that feature, and they'll be right there to assist you. But I just want you guys to know that cool feature that we just added, a quick breach button on our website that can be handy when you're dealing with an attack right there.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate the time today, Clever. Thanks for setting this up. If there are questions following this discussion, if there are follow-ups, please do reach out. Let Clever know. We'll get in touch and we'll have some discussions specific to your organization.
Awesome. And we'll follow up with the recording of the webinar, and perhaps, Mike, if you can send me the slides, we'll get them to everyone in case they just want to gloss over them in their own time. So,
Absolutely.
all right. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks,
Appreciate you.
everyone.